Mario Kart 64 is really a timeless game. And when you look back at the quote unquote 64 titles, whether it be Star Fox 64 or Super Mario 64, I would have to say that Mario Kart 64 probably has one of the, if not the most faithful audiences still to this day. Now, I know we have been spoiled in present day, obviously, with the reimagination of Mario Kart making its way to the Switch, kind of that culmination, that almost celebration of all previous Mario Kart games, including tracks and characters scattered really across all the franchises. It's very easy to forget the impact that Mario Kart 64 had on video gaming, on kart racing, and really on the N64 longevity. And I think one of the few games that early on really cemented this as a very special gaming system. It was supposed to actually launch with the release of the console, but because there was so much emphasis put on other games, namely Super Mario 64, Mario Kart got the shaft and it didn't come out until February of 1997, a couple months after the launch of the N64. A couple of things that I think really distinguish this iteration of Mario Kart from the original Super Nintendo Mario Kart is obviously 3D graphics and 3D terrain. So you guys might remember in the old Mario Kart, everything was flat. And it used this graphic technique that I've referred to quite a bit on this channel, known as Mode 7 graphics. The Mode 7 graphics were phenomenal for this kind of texture mapping as long as it was flat. You see it in a lot of games, namely Mario Kart, F-Zero, even Final Fantasy III when you're utilizing the airship. Anything that's below you and moving at a very fast rate, sometimes even 60 frames a second, believe it or not. That's how powerful Mode 7 graphics were back then. The one thing they could not do was they could not figure out how to include true... Yes, I know, I just hit myself with my own shell. I saw it. They did not know how to do 3D graphical design. So the fact that this game included true polygons gave us things like Wario Stadium with large hills and large walls and ramps and turns, and it gave us a real sense of scale and distance. You could look in the horizon on this map and see the audience, and you can see the scoreboards, if, you know, not really a scoreboard race per se, I guess, but, you know, like the replay board of like you know, like imagine a cameraman zooming in and showing off some of the gameplay. Like, you would also see things in the horizon like other parts of the track. Depending on what track you were on, you know, a lot of the tracks did loops and they passed by each other, so you would be able to see areas above or below you. That was a really big deal for the time. And I remember playing this game and just being incredibly impressed by the ability for this game to draw that kind of stuff. And I understand that the N64 obviously focused on that. I mean, I think we were all equally blown away by Super Mario 64, particularly when you're climbing trees and being shot out of a cannon halfway across the map. I think putting it in a kart racing world was something that was very novel, and I think that is one of the reasons why this game generated so much interest when it did. Obviously, it's gone on to numerous sequels and remasters and remakes, but I want to focus on the original essence of Mario Kart 64. It did have a few game modes with it. It had a Grand Prix mode, a time trial mode, a versus mode, and a battle mode, which nothing really standing out here from the previous iterations of the game, although I would argue that the battle mode was definitely much more interesting, particularly with the increase in elevation. You were able to set a lot more traps, shoot shells down below you, and I think it made fighting for the high ground something that meant a lot more in a kart racing game, which you don't really think of kart racing fighting, but anyways. It also featured 8 playable characters: Mario, Luigi, Peach, Toad, Yoshi, Bowser, Wario, and DK himself. Now, Obviously, as more Mario Kart games came on, the roster increased significantly. I would have to say, looking back on this in hindsight, this is a pretty good representation of the characters that mattered during the early years of Nintendo. They were still very much kind of sticking to those classic characters, though. You weren't seeing characters from other franchises spill over, not in the way like Smash, where you're kind of taking all the characters and bringing them together from across multiple franchises. This is the very core Super Mario crew. Wario is, I guess, maybe the oddball there because, you know, he isn't really canon per se in traditional Mario games. Although he does have a lot of 2D side-scrolling adventures in the vein of Mario, so I guess that was probably the idea that they were going for there. When this game released, it launched to critical acclaim as expected. It came out at a very odd time. When you think of other games that really had, you know, a strong 3D appearance, Donkey Kong Country, Cruisin' USA, Killer Instinct, just to name a few. I think when you look at Mario Kart and the way that they generated a lot of 2D graphics overlaid in 3D environments, it does really create a pretty cool optic that I think has a very gorgeous aesthetic that still lasts today. And you can even see things here like on this level where I struggle a lot. You could see things like reflections on the map where, you know, you have the reflection of your character, of the penguins going by, of the geometry of the world. If you had green shells or red shells, they too have reflections as well. I think they've done a really good job of capturing a true 3D environment in a, you know, very limited hardware space, and they really did push the envelope here. And thankfully, I don't think this game suffers too much from any major graphical hitches or anything like that. I think it was pretty smooth to kind of how I expected a game to look back then. You know, it definitely doesn't run at the 60 frames a second that we expect that we get in the new Mario Kart games, for example, but for the time and what it was actually trying to perform, I think it was very smooth and colorful and bright, and I think it did a really good job of kind of capturing that aesthetic. From the sound design, this was definitely a very memorable soundtrack. You know, every course has its own unique flair to it. Well, I shouldn't say every single one. There are definitely tropes. You have a like racetrack type, and you'll notice that as you play various racetracks that are traditional paved, you know, racetracks, they all utilize a lot of the same music. But I thought it was fun that they had a pretty nice collection of various songs. On the last lap, the music would pick up in intensity depending on kind of where you were on the racetrack. I felt like you were involved in the music in a sense, and I appreciated that. Which leads me to, why am I even talking about this game today? Why am I covering it? Well, in case you missed the memo, I told you that this whole week was going to be a Nintendo week, and it was going to be dedicated to the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack service. Now, we don't have a lot of games yet for the expansion pack. That's really one of the major controversies of this entire release, is that there isn't a lot of games here. I think they're very heavily relying on the Animal Crossing DLC to do a portion of the heavy lifting of the cost. But in terms of looking at and reviewing some of these timeless games, it's hard for me not to lovingly spend about 17 or so minutes discussing Mario Kart 64 and its impact on games, and really with an emphasis of how does it run on the Nintendo Switch, specifically with the new N64 Bluetooth controller. So when this game came out, unfortunately, Rumble Pack technology did not yet exist. That would not come out until later, namely with Star Fox 64, although a lot of games did eventually receive Rumble Pack support for it. Mario Kart 64 unfortunately never did. And I think that definitely sets this game apart because it feels very empty at times when you're racing. it feels like they should have figured out a way back when. I wouldn't expect them to now. But hey, if you want to, that's great as well. To really include that, I think there's a lot of times when drifting or using boost mushrooms or jump pads would have really benefited from that rumble pack feature. And I can't help but think that because the timing of Star Fox 64 and this game, these games really were developed somewhat in parallel. And I just can't believe that Nintendo would make such an oversight on this game and just basically forget to include rumble pack support, but they did. So know that you're going to be playing this with a very kind of flat experience. In terms of controls and everything, despite the fact that I am an atrocious driver, and by the way, I really did try my best here to really kind of play as good as I could. As a matter of fact, this is my second run. I actually started a separate game with Bowser, but I was playing so poorly, it was so embarrassing that I reset it. So this match, these 4 races, they're pretty rough to watch in hindsight, but I think it gives you a good flair of what to expect. And it does have a really cool finish to it, so stick around for that at least. I thought there was a couple really good photo finishes in there, and I do turn on the heat when I need to, but not always. With the control scheme, though, this does utilize the analog support. As far as I can recall, this was really the first racing game to include true analog support. Now, I'm sure there's some purist out there that's going to tell me like Cruisin' USA or some other racing game beat Nintendo to the punch on analog stick support. But I gotta say that playing a racing game with an analog stick versus a D-pad is something that I really enjoyed. I remember thinking about it back then and definitely re-experiencing it now, thinking about just how smooth the controls were. And the ability to turn in a very gentle way, just to barely bump the analog stick and to narrowly avoid cars or opponents or obstacles on the racetrack. And it had a very smooth feel to it, especially when you get into drifting. And this game features an extensive amount of drifting. Again, I try to display it as best I can from time to time. But the idea of being able to drift and to really control your character around these very difficult maneuvers was something that I feel was uniquely capable because of that analog stick, and I like that. So the Nintendo 64 Bluetooth controller works phenomenally here. The way they have designed the buttons by default is your ZL button, which would be your left index finger when holding the controller in the center, is used for your weapons. You mash down on the A button to give yourself gas, and you have your R1 button, which is your right index finger on the top. That is utilized for your drifting. You could also utilize, and I did it only at the very beginning and just one time, you can also utilize the C button to change your camera perspective to zoom out just a little bit farther to give you a little bit better view. And I actually like that better. My preference actually is to get an item and to lay it behind me. I love the banana train. That was actually a great thing because that pulled the cart out even farther. Gave you a pretty decent field of view, which I thought was important in a game like this. In terms of the kind of overall gameplay, this game had a really nasty rubber banding AI element to it, which works in your benefit sometimes, like in my case when I'm in 8th place, and other times when you are absolutely destroying the competition, it's a little bit frustrating. Unlike other Mario games, you'll notice there are no coins on the map to give you more boost. Typically, in the other Mario games, the amount of coins you have determine your overall top speed. Here they elected for no coins. Instead, you gain your speed by well-timed drifts and by items. They didn't have that back then with the coins, which is fine because they did have them previously. I don't know. The coin thing is a very weird debate, but they're not here. What is here, though, is this rubber banding mechanic, and unfortunately, it doesn't always work the way you want it to. Basically, the game, in an effort to keep things competitive, will allow cars at farther positions back incredible amounts of speed to catch up. Sometimes, if you're going so fast, if you hit a superstar or a boost mushroom at just the right time, you will literally fly past opponents that are seemingly standing completely still. You'll see this here at the very last turn as I finish this race in first place. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And this mechanic was something that has definitely been toned down in more recent Mario games, but at the time, because this game prominently featured multiple player support in an effort to keep things somewhat competitive, Nintendo put that in there. I think they were a little too aggressive on it, but that's okay. And here you see what I'm talking about. I mean, I completely passed Yoshi like he is standing still and go on to win. Yes, it wasn't the smoothest victory, but ultimately I did finish in first, and overall I got first place, and we'll be treated to a nice little parade at the end of Princess's Castle, and that's where I'll close out this video. In closing, I do want to say that I think Mario Kart is a great game. It's still a great game. Pretty much any iteration of Mario Kart is special. I think this one is incredibly special, again, for all the technical reasons that I mentioned. There's definitely a lot of nostalgia there, but I think utilizing the N64 controller was really a lot of fun. I do miss the vibration on it, but I had a good time. Just get used to the fact that you're going to be using your left thumbs to use the steering, as opposed to most modern games where instead the left is more for kind of movement, and typically you're using your right thumbstick for more precise movement. So that's going to take a while for me to get used to, and that's clearly why I raced not the best, but that's okay. That wraps up this video review, this retro review of Mario Kart 64. I hope you guys found this video fun and informative, and it brings you back to the great February of 1997, when your boy Jim E was a mere 15, 16 years old. Oh, now I'm an old man. That's it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.